everyone. This week you'll be writing a paragraph. We're not going to write the paragraph today. Today we're just going to plan it and do a little bit of work on it to get it ready. You're going to be proving that Betty Bright is a good coach. So I know that the prompt on the screen says, "Is Betty Bright a good coach?" I'm going to help you out and just let you know that yes, Betty Bright is a good coach. There's more text evidence in the story that Betty Bright is a good coach, so we are going to go with that side. And you are going to be finding text evidence today that proves that Betty Bright is a good coach. The supplies that you'll need to start today's activity are the worksheet that is white. You should have one of those. A pencil or something to write with, probably a pencil in case you make a mistake. You definitely want to be able to erase it. And your tangerine novel. Make sure that you have all of those three things. If you're listening to this video, you obviously already have a Chromebook and some headphones. So let's go ahead and get started. During this video, I'm going to ask you to be flipping around a lot in your book, as well as kind of on the paper. So what you'll do is make sure that you pay attention to this video. When I tell you to pause the video, you should do that so that you can write things down. And I will give you a little bit of time to write things down. But make sure that you're paying attention and just pausing when you are asked to in this video, and then everything will be great. It is important that you know that this paper is going to be collected for a completion grade, so it must be done. It is not optional. You don't have to get it done today. I think we will get it done because I'm going to help you get it done in the video, but you can turn it into the sub when you are done with it. We won't be working on this paper again until Wednesday, so the sub can take it and keep it safe so that you don't have to worry about losing it. All right, before we get started, I'd like you to turn your paper over so that you have just the white side on the back, the blank side, and I'd like to challenge you to think of some things that make a good coach. What do you think makes a good coach? I know that some of you have played sports. Not everyone has played on a sports team, but you might be able to imagine what types of things do you think make a good coach. So let me give you some examples because I would like you to try and think of 3 things that make a good coach. So let me ask you some questions. Does a good coach yell and scream at players to motivate them? I don't know. Is that what you think makes a good coach? What about, does a good coach always have to have experience playing that sport? Or can a good coach be someone who has never played the sport that they're coaching? You can think of those things. Is a good coach a strong leader? Or does a good coach let the players lead? So just some of those things, if you can think of, I'd like you to jot down 3 characteristics that you think make a good coach. So pause the video and try and write down on the back of your paper 3 things that make a good coach. Pause the video and write those 3 things right now. All right, here's a list of things that I came up with. Your list might be different or it might include some of these things. I think, for me, a good coach is smart. They know about the sport or the thing that they're coaching. They don't necessarily have to have played the sport, but they know about it. So maybe they haven't played the sport, but maybe they've really learned about it and know all kinds of things about it. A good coach to me is someone who is kind and helpful. A good coach would help me when I don't know how to do something and would help me get better at that. So that would show me kindness. A good coach to me is a great leader. Knows when to let players lead and knows when to lead themselves. A good coach to me encourages players when they're having a bad day or when they're frustrated. A good coach is a hard worker because being a coach actually takes up a lot of your time, so you have to be a hard worker to be dedicated. A good coach might challenge players. A good coach cannot just let players do things that are easy for them. You have to challenge players so that they can get better. A good coach is confident. They show confidence in their team. They know that their team can win and do a great job. And then a good coach has pride. So a good coach, to me, doesn't go around bashing their team to other people, but they have pride, and so they feel like they're proud of their team that they coach. So these are the things that make a good coach to me. You might have some of these or you might have a few different things. but hopefully you were able to come up with at least 3 things on the back of your paper that make a good coach. Don't forget, this paper is a completion grade, so you need to make sure that you're doing everything that is being asked in this video. All right, flip this paper back over so that you are looking at the same thing that is on the screen right now. Make sure that you write your name up here, and then you can write the date. Today's date is 12/9/19, so you can write that up there. You'll be all set. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. And maybe while you're still writing your name, or if you're all ready, let's go ahead and read the directions. The directions say that this organizer is going to help you write a paragraph about Paul's soccer coach at Tangerine Middle School, Betty Bright. Read each step below and use your book to find the answers. Ask for help if you need it. So if you need additional help that this video does not provide you, you can ask the sub, but I'm hoping that everything will be very clear because we are doing it together in the video. All right, as you can see, I've got your prompt right here. We've already been over this, but I'm just going to show you again. Your prompt is to prove that Betty Bright is a good coach. We are going to say that she is a good coach for sure, and so we are going to be proving that she does a good job, she is a good coach, not saying that she's a bad coach. Okay, so we're going to say that she's a good coach for our purposes. You don't necessarily have to believe that she is a good coach, but I'm telling you that there is more text evidence in the story to prove that she's a good coach, and so we're going to stick with that side, because when you're writing, you should definitely pick the side that is easier to prove. You shouldn't make it harder on yourself. All right, so let's get started on number 1. The first thing that I'm going to do is read you the question, and you are going to turn to page 134. So go ahead and pause this video while you open your book to page 134. All right, here's your prompt, and you're looking at page 134, so you're ready to go. On page 134, what does Betty Bright do that shows she's a good coach? I also gave you a hint. The hint says to check the very last paragraph on the page. So what I would like you to do is right now, I'd like you to pause this video, read the last paragraph on the page, and I can even show you where the last paragraph starts. I'm on page 134, just like you should be, and the last paragraph is this one right here. So before we go over the answer, I need you to read this paragraph to yourself, and you need to try and think of what Betty Bright did here that made her a good coach. Don't write it down yet because we want to make sure that we're together on this. Pause this video and read this paragraph. All right, so hopefully you have read this paragraph and you have an idea of what you think Betty Bright did that made her a good coach. Let's stick with this together and so that we can all have a really good answer. All right, so the paragraph says, "We gathered in a circle on the sideline to eat our tangerines. The coach said good game to a couple of players, then spent the rest of her time talking to Chandra about the 3 goals, how she shouldn't think any more about them, how she should adjust for the second half. Finally, she looked over at Victor. Captain, do you have anything to say?" All right, what are your thoughts for what made Betty Bright a good coach in this paragraph? I'm going to underline what I was thinking. All right, so I was thinking that when Betty Bright talks to Chandra about these 3 goals, that obviously Chandra must have allowed the other team to score 3 goals, which in soccer is a lot of goals, but she's trying to tell Chandra that it doesn't matter. Don't worry about those right now. Just focus on the second half and focus on what we can do. I also thought that this was pretty similar right here. When the coach said good game to a couple players, she's doing the same thing here that I thought she was doing down here. Okay, so let's go back to the paper. And we'll go ahead and write this first one together so that you have a really good example to start. The first thing that I would like you to do is I would like you to choose one of the transition words that is on this list to start your sentence. Make sure that you choose one that makes sense. If this is your first piece of text evidence, does it make sense to start your sentence with finally? No, absolutely not. You should not use finally. You could use first. You could use for example. You could use for instance. You can use any of these except finally. And can you use second? No, you cannot use second because this is the first piece of text evidence. So choose a transition word and write it on the line. I'm going to start with for example. I don't care which one you pick. You can pick the one that you like the best. You can use first if you like, or you can use any of those other ones. Remember, these are your choices that you can choose. I'll give you a second if you need to pick one. Go back to your paper and write your transition word on the line. If you want to use for example like I do, that's fine. Otherwise, you should have your own. All right. And now we need to talk about what Betty Bright did that made her a good coach. So remember, in the paragraph that we read on the bottom of page 134, she was talking to Chandra. She was letting her know that the 3 goals didn't matter. She was giving her some, like a little pep talk at halftime. And she also told some other players, good game. So let's go back to the paper. And you can see the rest of my answer explains what happened what was happening in the story, the part that I just read. So my sentence says, for example, during a soccer game, Betty Bright told Chandra not to worry and focus on the next part of the game. If I had more room, I might write, Betty Bright told Chandra not to worry about the goals the other team scored and to focus on the next part of the game. I might add that. That actually would make my sentence better, but I was kind of running out of room. If you would like, you can use this sentence, but you have to write it on your paper. If you have something better to say, that is fine, but you have to have something written on your paper. So go ahead and pause this video, and what you can do is you can either write your own thoughts about what was happening during the game, or you can copy this one, but you must have this filled in. Pause the video and do that now. Okay, so now that you have an answer written on the lines, now we can answer this question right here. So this text evidence, so this that I wrote right here, do you think that this proves that Betty Bright challenges or encourages her soccer players? So what was I just showing? Was I showing that Betty Bright was challenging Chandra or that she was encouraging her? Take a second to circle your answer. All right, I hope that you chose that she was encouraging her players. She wasn't challenging Chandra to get better and, giving her some suggestions or, doing any drills with her or anything like that. She was encouraging Chandra. A good coach encourages his or her players to do a great job and be their best. Now we should be ready to go on to the next question. Okay, let's go on to number 2. Number 2, on page 135, what does Betty Bright do to show that she's a good coach? There's no hint here, so I will show you on page 135 where I want you to look. But the first thing I would like you to do before we even find any of this text evidence is I would like you to pick your next transition word that you're going to use. So pick a new one, don't pick the same one. Pick a different transition word that you would like to use and write it on the lines below the question. Here are the transition words that are your choice. Pick one that you like. I think that I might pick for instance for the second one, but you can pick any that you like. All right, so right now all I've done is I've picked my transition words. So I typed it on the line, and you should have yours written on the line. And now we can go to page 135 and take a look at the text evidence to prove that Betty Bright is a good coach. All right, so you should have opened your book to page 135, and I have 2 red stars that show you where you can find the information in the story. So you should start reading Tino, please ask your father, and end down here with now deal with that. Okay, so you can kind of see down here where to end, and you can definitely see where to start up here. Okay, so we've already done one of these together, so I'm not going to give you the answer this time, but I'm going to let you take a look and read this short section that I have indicated for you, and I'm going to see if you can decide what Betty Bright did that proves she is a good coach. So pause the video right now, read this section, and think about what made her a good coach. All right, so did you read the text? Did you figure out what Coach Bright did that made her a good coach? It has something to do with Victor, which I hope you picked up on that because Victor was the other person mentioned in that little section that I showed you. Remember this section. I really don't feel like I'm going to help you on this one because I feel like this one is so obvious. You should know what Betty Bright did that made her a good coach. Now, I will help you by helping you start your sentence. So, as you know, we already picked a transition word. Yours does not have to be the same as mine, but you have to have a transition word. The next thing I'm going to help you out with is how to start your sentence so that you don't just start writing and have a transition word and then barf out something that happened in the story. So the way that I can help you is right here. I can help you by saying something like the text stated that Coach Bright, and then what you need to do, the part that I'm not going to tell you about, that you can figure out for yourself is how to finish the sentence. What did Coach Bright do that helped prove to you that she was a good coach? And remember, on the last example that we did together, we did not copy right from the story. You cannot copy the words that the author wrote in the story. These were my own words that I made up from my head. So when you start writing your sentence, you need to tell me in your own words what Coach Bright was doing that made her a good coach. I've started the sentence for you. For instance, the text stated that Coach Bright, and now you just have to finish it. So you need to write this down. Write what you thought that Coach Bright did during this section of the book that made her a good coach. If you do not understand, if you still don't understand what Coach Bright did, you need to ask the sub for some help right now. Otherwise, you are writing your own sentence. You are finishing my sentence and so that you have your own. I'll give you pause this video and do that right now. All right, if you're rejoining this video, that means that you have a completed sentence on these lines right here and you're ready to move on. Now, based on this text evidence that you just found, let's go on to this next question right here. The text evidence above proves that Betty Bright is protective or scared of her soccer players. Remember, we talked about good coaches do certain things. Did Betty Bright prove that she was scared of Victor or that she was protective of Victor? You choose. I'm not going to give you the answer. I think you can definitely get this one on your own. Take a second, circle your answer, and then let's move on to number 3. You are almost done with this paper. All right, let's move on to number 3. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I saved the hardest one for last, but by now you are getting really good at this and you can do it. So we're going to find more text evidence to prove that Betty Bright is a good coach. So we're going to go to page 137. So open up your book to page 137. And on page 137, what does Betty Bright do to show she's a good coach? I did give you a hint here, and I'll show you in the book as well. We need to check the paragraph that starts the Cano players. So let's go there, and I'll show you exactly where you need to look. Okay, so I've actually opened my book to page 137, where you should also be, and I have the exact page where you should be looking, and I have the exact paragraph in the red box here. The Cano players never recovered from that assault, although they did manage to move the ball into our end of the field. It turns out that Joey's a pretty terrible soccer player. They had no trouble beating him again and again. Chandra had to make a few tough saves near the end, but that's probably what Betty Bright wanted. The final score was Tangerine 7, Kinno 3. So going back to number 3, the first thing that we'll do is we will start the sentence with a transition word. Which one do you want to pick? Make sure that you pick one that you haven't used. It does make sense if you like finally. It makes sense to use that one since this is the last piece of evidence, but I don't care which one you use. It doesn't matter to me. Pick one and write it down. I decided that my transition word would be in this case, but I don't care which one you pick. Maybe you like finally. Now, I will tell you that this one is very tough. It's very tough to figure out what Betty Bright did in this little very short section to prove that she's a good coach, especially because the only time that the paragraph even talks about Betty Bright is right here at the end. And you need the stuff earlier in the paragraph to really help you understand what she did that made her a good coach. But I do think you can do it. Now, I'll give you a hint. If you want, if you think that you know it, go ahead and write it down. You should not take my hint. So pause this video. If you think you're good, you've got this, you feel confident, pause the video and write down what Betty Bright did that made her a good coach. If you want a hint, keep watching. All right. If you stayed, you must be here for the hint. The hint actually comes by answering this question right here. So the text evidence above proves that Betty Bright leads her soccer players or challenges her soccer players. So if I'm looking back at the passage, if you read this short little section over again, did Betty Bright lead her players in this section, or did Betty Bright challenge her players in this section? And actually, I'll give you a hint, it's only one player. Did she lead a player in this section, or did she challenge a player? That might help you finish the rest of your sentence right here, okay? Now, I will give you, if you already picked your transition word, but you need a little bit more of the starter sentence, I can give you that as well. So let's take a look at how I would start the sentence. All right, so I decided to start the sentence by saying, in this case, remember that's my transition word, in this case, the coach decided to, and then I would go ahead and talk about what the coach decided to do. What did Betty Bright do here in this red section? Now, one other thing that I want to point out is that I have been trying not to repeat Betty Bright's name a million times. So in this case, I used, in number 3, I just said the coach. I did not say her name. If you noticed, back in number 2, I said Coach Bright, so that I didn't say Betty Bright again. But back in number 1, I actually did use her name because it was the first time. So we just want to make sure that we're kind of mixing it up and not always saying Betty Bright, Betty Bright, Betty Bright. There's lots of different names that we can call her. We can call her Miss Bright. We could call her Coach Bright. We could call her Betty. We could just use her last name and say Bright. We could say Paul's coach. So there are a lot of different variations that we can use, and I just wanted to point that out to you. All right, so before you turn in this paper, you should make sure that you have filled in the rest of this sentence because it's still missing. If you don't understand how to complete the rest of the sentence, I'm going to strongly encourage you to ask the substitute for help because you don't want to do this wrong and you want to make sure that you get this done because remember, this is a completion grade. Ask for help if you need it. Finally, let's answer the last question. We've already talked about it. The text evidence from this page over here, did that lead you to believe that Betty Bright leads her soccer players or she challenges her soccer players? Make sure that you have chosen either A or B. Make sure that you have filled in everything on this paper and then you can turn it into the sub. The sub can collect it and so that I can get it back and give you an awesome grade for completing this. Thank you guys. I hope you have a great day. Have a good Monday, and I'll be back with you guys soon.